We are live at the Greenwood Cultural Center at a discussion between the Tulsa police entities, different attorneys, and the public of Tulsa, Oklahoma. One panel member is answering a question now. I'll be returning to that answer live in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Because I just don't want that out. But we're not working with the staffing that we need in our division. But that's about to change somewhat. Not only is it we're going to get a little more added staff with the new academy class about to graduate, but we're also about to hire, as you know, more officers. Now, I don't want to wait 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, nor do you. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement the same downtown program into a neighborhood in North Tulsa. And it's not a surprise. I'll tell you exactly where it's going to be. The highest crime rate in our division is between 51st Street North and 61st Street North from Cincinnati to Hartford. It breaks my heart. Violent crimes, crime rate is approximately 6 or 7 times more in that area than the rest of our division. And we have a lot of good men and women up there that are just almost victims of this. And we're just tired of that. And so we've been doing our typical police strategies trying to stop that, but we're going to implement community policing into that section, and we're going to drive that crime down. I'm looking forward to that. And we need to take that further. And we need to implement this in the minds and ideas of all of our police officers. And it's not an easy task, but it's something that is on all of our hearts to do.
Okay, thank you. Captain Busby?
The theory and concept of community policing involves a partnership that is developed between law enforcement and the community to address issues of crime, but also quality of life issues. And so to that extent, what we have to develop, if it's still the narrative of do we have it and when will it be in place, there has to be that dialogue that occurs that says, this is what we mean by this and this is what we're looking for to develop that partnership. We have to talk to each other. As Travis says, we can't do this by ourselves. We're counting on the community to not only be our eyes and our ears, but to be also our mouth, because they've got to speak to tell us what's going on, because they know what's going on in their communities. And to the extent that we develop that partnership and that relationship where we can do things and talk about things that better their community, we need to move toward that and not get hindered by semantics and narrative and dialogue, but actually work on the partnership and developing that and putting that in place. And so to the extent that the community is seeing and saying, we want this and we need this, we have to start to engage and talk about, well, exactly what does that mean and what does that look like. The relationship has to be one more than just showing up when there's a problem. It is much better to have that ongoing relationship where we see each other outside the norms of our business relationship, which is we're responding to a particular issue. Most of the time when we show up, it's not really a good day. And so what we have to do is to change that dynamic to where you see us and it is a good day and it is a good thing. And we have those conversations and we have that dialogue and we're talking outside of the normal extent of being just confined to a call. So those are the things that I would say that we need to do in furthering the development and setting that framework for what community policing is and having that narrative discussion between the community and the police departments to start to develop that structure.
Thank you. Sheriff Regalado.
And everything that Captain Buzz and Major Yates, I mean, I obviously agree with, and that's all part of community policing. I want to take it just a step further, though. You know, I think the very core thing that oftentimes gets lost in this whole community policing idea is that it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. Yes, it's incumbent upon us as law enforcement officials to engage the community, no doubt about it. And you know, that's been one of the priorities as I took office at the Sheriff's office, was again, community engagement, getting out there, being at different festivals and things like that are in the communities and represent those certain communities. And that's all fine and good. Those are things that are easy to do. As a law enforcement officer, communication really is the core skill that you should have to be successful as a cop, as a deputy. And so getting out there and doing those things, those are fun because we hand out toys and we hand out things like that. But let's get to the serious business, okay? Let's talk about the two-way street, the accountability. Could you imagine, look around you today, okay? Because of recent events, we've gathered here today, and we've put law enforcement officials up here on the stand, and I don't mean that in a negative way, okay? But on the panel, there you go, okay? The judge liked that, though. And it's, and it's not difficult. I mean, getting in front of people's always, can be problematic sometimes, especially when you know some of them don't feel real happy with you right now. And that's okay. What I'm getting at is that, can you imagine if you fill this auditorium up and put the people that are committing crimes in your community and made them answer up? That's community policing, because you know what? We get out there, we do our jobs, and Major Yates touched on it about staffing. I can talk all day about staffing problems at the sheriff's office, and we can get out there and we can do what we can do, but guess who's out there all the time? En masse. You are in the community, and if you put that same energy and pressure and assistance with the police in dealing with what is truly affecting all of our communities, crime, I'm telling you, we're not here today. And that's something that I think everyone needs to ask themselves. You cannot simply point that finger without having one pointed back at you. And so that's the thing that I hope that we can get out of this, is that this is not a incumbent. Community policing does not mean law enforcement, what can you do for us today or tomorrow? It's what can we do for each other? And I think once we can all answer that honestly, I think we're going to make great strides. And I'll tell you, we've done it here in Tulsa. Chief Jordan has brought it up before, and unfortunately it was under the worst of circumstances, but there was no better form, shape of community policing than what occurred on the Good Friday shootings. And it was a horrific time, but I can tell you that on the back end, having seen what occurred between the community and the police during that time, was awe-inspiring, and I truly mean that. And it's hard to get that across to you if you weren't there and you didn't experience it, but for those of you that were intimately involved and around that time, the positive of all that was it was amazing to see the partnership in which police and the community work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. We're going to move on to a question for the entire panel. Originally it says, what role does the city manager play in race relations in Tulsa? But I think this is a question that all of the panelists can answer. And when you answer the question, please try to keep your answer to 2 minutes. And instead of city manager, like what role did the city manager play with race relations in Tulsa? Let's say, what role does the police or the public defender or a prosecutor or the U.S. Attorney's Office? Because I think that we are saying things, but we're not saying the thing, right? We're not actually saying, we use in Tulsa, thank you. We use the word in Tulsa. I noticed this when I moved here. We say North Tulsa when we mean Black Tulsa. We say, we use like coded language, right? When people talk about, and not that anyone on the panel has done this, but dog whistle racism. So we have these things where we're kind of saying something, but we're not really saying something. So if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about how there are race relation problems in our city. Yes? Yeah. And so, and also I want you all to know that all of the questions are not on here. There were questions about our community. There were a lot of questions, especially in the policy group, right? There were some people in my group who had questions. What do we do? So today, for this question, what role does your office or you in particular play in ameliorating race relations in the city of Tulsa? And we can start on this end with Mr. Phillips, and let's try to keep our answers between 2 to 3 minutes.
Thanks for the question. I do want to push back a little bit on the sheriff here about community policing.
This is David Phillips, an attorney.
Community mentioned a 21st century policing policy, commission you made. The number one thing on that list was building trust back in the community. Before we can get to that dialogue coming back into the community, I think the first of all is that we've got to restore trust. And the way that you restore trust is that you have to have several things that are in place. As a public defender, we hold the justice system accountable. Our goal is to make sure, first of all, that our clients get adequate representation and they get the best representation that they can. But let's make sure that the police officers dot their I's and cross their T's. Let's make sure that your rights as a citizen are not infringed upon. And when your rights are protected, because then you can feel confident in the system. Now, I agree with the sheriff on the fact that we had a great community coming together with the Easter Friday shootings. We also had, I think, a similar moment when we had the Bates trial, where we began to hold people accountable, officers accountable for their actions. And until the community can believe that no matter whether you put on a badge or whether you wear blue jeans, that you get the same type of justice and the same type of representation and the same type of respect that the police officer does and the guy on the street corner does, we're not going to have that trust.
Sheriff.
This is what's good about these talks, because I'm going to counter what David here said. No, I do, to say that anything's perfect, again, nothing is perfect. Okay, but the trust, time and time again, and I've worked in North Tulsa, I've worked everywhere in this city, predominantly in North Tulsa. And the one thing that I always heard just in passing, going to QTs, what have you, was people telling their kids that when you get lost, look for a guy or a gal in this uniform, or this uniform. So we can tell our children to trust police, but somehow we don't trust them. Now, I get it. Again, let me preface this. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. We acknowledge it. And let me tell you something more. Since, like Devon said, let's get to the brass tacks. I can tell you that when an officer or a deputy or anybody in law up and does something that nobody, I'm telling you, there's nobody. You got to earn that trust. Protecting the very ones that were being critical of them should show you. Remember that. I think that we're
Sheriff's Office, and we need to